The floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Jewish people are a patient people. Throughout 3,000 years of civilization, foreign conquest, exile, and return, Jerusalem has remained their spiritual home. For nearly 70 years, the city of Jerusalem has been the capital of the state of Israel, despite many attempts by others to deny that reality. The American people are less patient. In 1948, the United States was the first nation to recognize the independent state of Israel. In 1995, the U.S. Congress declared that Jerusalem should be recognized as the capital of Israel and that the U.S. Embassy should be located in Jerusalem. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama all agreed with that position, but they did not act. They delayed in the hopes that a peace process would produce results that never came. For 22 years, the American people have overwhelmingly supported that position, and they have waited and waited. This week, President Trump finally made the decision to no longer deny the will of the American people. It's important to be clear about exactly what the president's decision does. The president has announced that the United States recognizes the obvious, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. He has also instructed the State Department to begin the process of relocating the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That is what the president has done, and this is what he has not done. The United States has not taken a position on boundaries or borders. The specific dimensions of sovereignty over Jerusalem are still to be decided by the Israelis and the Palestinians in negotiations. The United States has not advocated changing any of the arrangements at the Temple Mount Harim al-Sharif. The president specifically called for maintaining the status quo at the holy sites. Finally, and critically, the United States is not predetermining final status issues. We remain committed to achieving a lasting peace agreement. We support a two-state solution if agreed to by the parties. Those are the facts of what was said and done this week. Now there are a few more points that are central to the discussion of this issue. Israel, like all nations, has the right to determine its capital city. Jerusalem is the home of Israel's parliament, president, prime minister, Supreme Court, and many of its ministries. It is simple common sense that foreign embassies be located there. In virtually every country in the world, U.S. embassies are located in the host country's capital city. Israel should be no different. The United States took this step in full knowledge that it will raise questions and concerns. Our actions are intended to help advance the cause of peace. We must recognize that peace is advanced, not set back, when all parties are honest with each other. Our actions reflected an honest assessment of reality. I understand the concern members have in calling this session. Change is hard, but we should never doubt what the truth can do. We should never doubt that when we face the truth, believe in the human spirit, and encourage each other, that peace can happen. To those who have good faith concerns about the future of peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, let me again assure you that the President and this administration remain committed to the peace process. To those who do not act in good faith, to any person, leader, country, or terrorist group that uses this week's decision as a pretext for violence, you are only showing yourselves to be unfit partners of peace. Finally, I will not let this moment pass without a comment about the United Nations itself. Over many years, the United Nations has outrageously been of the world's foremost centers of hostility towards Israel. The UN has done much more damage to the prospects for Middle East peace than to advance them. We will not be a party to that. The United States no longer stands by when Israel is unfairly attacked in the United Nations. And the United States will not be lectured to by countries that lack any credibility when it comes to treating both Israelis and Palestinians fairly. It is no coincidence that the historic peace agreements between Egypt and Israel and between Jordan and Israel were both signed on the White House lawn. If and when there's a historic peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, there's a good likelihood that it too will be signed on the White House lawn. Why is that? It's because the United States has credibility with both sides. Israel will never be, and should never be, bullied into an agreement by the United Nations or by any collection of countries that have proven their disregard for Israel's security. To my Palestinian brothers and sisters, I can tell you with complete confidence that the United States is deeply committed to achieving a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We have demonstrated that commitment over many years and with the investment of large quantities of financial resources and diplomatic energy. Sadly, peace between the two sides has not been achieved, but we will not give up. Our hand remains extended to you. We are more committed to the cause of Israeli-Palestinian peace today than we've ever been before, and we believe we might be closer to that goal than ever before. Both Israelis and Palestinians have very real stories to tell, painful stories of challenges, distrust, and destruction. But this conflict is not just about the past. It must not be about all of those painful stories. It must be about future generations. Palestinian and Israeli children both deserve a future of peace, one no more and no less than the other. When those children are grown, they should look back and look to this time when the parties genuinely negotiated for their sake. These Palestinian and Israeli children deserve to have hope of a brighter and more peaceful future. Our wish and prayer is that this is the time both sides stop thinking about present needs and start thinking about future generations. I urge all countries in the Security Council and in the Middle East to temper their statements and their actions in the days ahead. Peace remains achievable. We must all do our parts to achieve it. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Joining me now, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. Let's start with President Trump's reasoning in making this move. Here he is.
This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement.
Ambassador, how does recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and starting to move our embassy there specifically, how does that advance the peace process?
Well, first of all, you have to, just say what's realistic. I mean, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. That's why the parliament's there, the Supreme Court's there, the president and the prime minister are there. So we have always, the United States has always had its embassy in the capital city, and so Israel should be no different. There have been presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle that have all said that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And so what we have said is, enough talking about it, let's do it. This is the will of the American people. The president wanted to follow through. Presidents Bush, Clinton, and Obama all said they were for it, but never did anything about it. And this president said it's time. And we think this is actually going to help us fastball the peace process going forward.
But I've got to tell you, I don't have to tell you that President Trump's decision is being criticized from all corners. Let's just take a quick rundown. Palestinian leader Abbas calls it a declaration of withdrawal from the peace process. British Prime Minister May calls it unhelpful in terms of prospects for peace in the region. Pope Francis expressed profound concern. Question, what are Abbas and May and even the Pope missing?
You know, I mean, leaders understand that courage is important, and we don't do things just to please every other country in the world. We do things to advance the ball, and that's what the president did with this. He said, this is time that we acknowledge reality. It's been 22 years in the making. It was time. And not only that, Chris, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Israel should be no different. We didn't set any parameters. We didn't say this was the final status. What we said is we're going to do like we do in every other country, and we're going to put the embassy in its capital, and we're going to continue and are going to continue that fact that we are as committed to the peace process as we've ever been before, and we're going to keep going until we get it.
I want to pick up on something you said in that last answer. Are you suggesting that despite President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital, to begin to move the embassy there, that the final status of Jerusalem is still up for negotiation, that in a negotiation, East Jerusalem could still end up as the capital of the Palestinian state? And again, if so, why make this move now?
Well, I think the president, if you notice in his speech, he made a point not to talk about borders or boundaries. What he did was say that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and that we're moving our embassy there, because he strongly believes that those final status issues should be decided between the Palestinians and the Israelis. No outside group should decide what the final status looks like, and we're leaving it up to them to do that. At the end of the day, they have to be comfortable with the peace process and the resolution that we come up with. We just want to support them in that process.
So again, specifically, East Jerusalem, if that's the result of the negotiation, East Jerusalem could still be the capital of a Palestinian state.
We will respect anything that the two parties come together on.
I want to talk about something else that happened this week. You spoke before the UN Security Council when they met on this subject, and you called out some of your fellow ambassadors. Here you are.
Over many years, the United Nations has outrageously been of the world's foremost centers of hostility towards Israel. The UN has done much more damage to the prospects for Middle East peace than to advance them.
Why, Ambassador, why was that helpful?
Because it's the facts. I mean, ever since I have gotten to the United Nations, there have been repeated attempts to hit Israel for no reason whatsoever. It's Israel bashing sessions, constantly trying to find ways to pick at them, and we've seen that start to diminish. But I want the Security Council and all of the international community to understand, when you bully Israel, you are not helping the peace process. And we see Israel as one of our best allies. We're not going to put up with it anymore. So when we see it, we call them out on it. It's time for them to realize that all of these things they've done to Israel have only hurt the process. We need to treat Palestinians and Israelis fairly. We need to hope that they both come together for a peaceful solution, and we need to support both of them. That has not happened for years in the United Nations, but it's starting to happen now.
Now, there has been a suggestion of a resolution to criticize or condemn the president's move in the Security Council. Of course, you would veto that, so the suggestion is perhaps it would be the UN General Assembly that would pass a resolution. What would the U.S. reaction be to that?
Oh, I would have a strong reaction to that. We have the right to do whatever we want in terms of where we put our embassies. We don't need other countries telling us what's right and wrong. And, you know, what I have always said is, if we are honest, if we tell the truth, that's when peace comes. And this was the president telling the world the truth. And this was him going through with the will of the American people who had asked for 22 years to get this done. And he had the courage to show it, and I think a lot of Americans have a huge sigh of relief because of it. And now, hopefully, we can see the peace process really come together.
I want to change trouble spots in the world on you, which is part of your job, because at the same time, the United States is calling on the rest of the world, the United Nations, to impose and force sanctions against North Korea. You say that the world has cut off 90% of trade with North Korea, but only 30% of oil to North Korea. And I guess my question is, after all the efforts President Trump has made to cajole China, to pressure China, why is it that Chinese President Xi is not doing more?
Well, I think what we are seeing is that China is actually following through with the sanctions. They are, as is the international community. And I'll tell you, when we talked about leadership earlier, the United States is the one that led the entire international community to basically out North Korea and say that they had to denuclearize and cut everything off. So we've done a great job at doing that. China has followed through on the sanctions, but to be clear, China can do more. And we're putting as much pressure on them as we can. The last time they completely cut off the oil, North Korea came to the table. And so we've told China they've got to do more. If they don't do more, we're going to take it into our own hands, and then we'll start to deal with secondary sanctions.
Well, I was going to ask you, why is it? Because certainly President Trump has launched a charm offensive and also a threatening offensive towards China. Why is it that President Xi refuses to do more?
Well, I think, President Xi has his reasons to have red lines. But President Trump and President Xi have a very good relationship. And for that, I think that's why we've gotten as far as we have in getting what we've gotten done. But President Trump is really starting to put the pressure on, saying that they've got to do more. Now it's time for China to respond.
Let's continue in the region. The U.S. Olympic Committee says it intends to send a full U.S. team to the Winter Olympics in South Korea in February, but this week you said that that is still an open question. Here you are.
I think it depends on what's going on at the time in the country. We have to watch this closely, and it's changing by the day.
Changing every day. So what is the status on this Sunday? Is the U.S. going to send a full U.S. Olympic team to South Korea or not?
Yes, we are. The only thing is we're doing in this Olympics what we've done in every single Olympics. If you look back, we have always talked about security in the Olympics. We've always talked about keeping our athletes safe. This is no different. And we are looking at the circumstances just to make sure we're doing everything we can. We're at the locations. We're starting to secure the process. But we always look out for the best interests of United States citizens. But yes, there will be a delegation that goes, and we will do everything we can to make sure they're safe.
Now, you say a delegation, the full U.S. Olympic team.
Yes, the full U.S. Olympic team.
During your time at the UN, Ambassador, I think it's fair to say you have stood out for your blunt, sometimes undiplomatic talk for a diplomat. Just the other day you said if there's war, that North Korea, the regime there, will be utterly destroyed. Why such tough talk?
It's the truth. I mean, the reality is if North Korea even attempts to try and threaten the United States or any one of our allies, they will be utterly destroyed. Diplomacy is great in some respects, but you have to also be honest. And this was something that North Korea needed to hear and the international community needed to hear. North Korea has pushed the envelope to an extreme level. The United States isn't going to put up with it. And the international community has also rallied around saying that North Korea has to denuclearize. But that's just the honest facts. If North Korea attempts to threaten or do anything to destabilize us or our allies, we absolutely will utterly destroy them.
So, given how well you reflect President Trump's approach, whether you call it diplomatic or undiplomatic, there's been a lot of speculation that if Secretary of State Tillerson were to leave his job sometime early next year, that the president might ask you to take the job, and you said this week that you would, quote, not take it. And I guess my question is, why on earth not?
I have said for months that I am not interested in the Secretary of State position, and it's because I know that I am valuable here at the United Nations. I'm able to negotiate. I'm able to move the ball. I'm able to really diplomatically do what I need to, and then sometimes not diplomatically do what I need to. And so I think I'm effective, and I try and do the best I can for the president as well as the American people. And so that's why I choose to stay in New York.
I just want to follow up quickly because I can understand why, given the fact that Tillerson hasn't left, you would say that. But I mean, are you making a Sherman-esque? And as a Southerner, you'd understand what that means, a Sherman-esque comment? Absolutely not. You would not take the Secretary of State job?
I would not take it. I am perfectly happy in New York and trying to be as effective as I can, and will continue to do so as long as the president will allow me to serve.
Ambassador Haley, thank you. Thanks for your time this weekend. Always good to talk with you.
Thanks so much, Chris.